David Chen stood at the window of his corner office on the 30th floor, looking down at the busy streets of downtown Seattle. As the CEO of TechVision Enterprises, a company he had built from scratch over the past decade, he should have felt proud of his $50 million success story. Instead, a heavy weight sat in his stomach as he read another anonymous complaint on his laptop. Toxic workplace. Management treats support staff like dirt. Impossible to advance unless you're part of the inner circle. The words stung, especially because this was the 10th such complaint this month. David ran his fingers through his graying hair, remembering the early days when TechVision was just 5 people working out of his garage. Back then, everyone knew each other's names, shared lunch together, and celebrated every small victory as a family. Something had changed over the years, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly when or how. The company had grown to over 200 employees across 3 floors of the building. David spent most of his time in meetings with investors, clients, and the board of directors. He rarely interacted with employees below the senior management level anymore. His assistant, Sarah, knocked on his door with his afternoon coffee. "Mr. Chen, your 3 p.m. meeting with the board has been pushed to tomorrow. Is there anything else you need?" David thanked her, noticing how she avoided eye contact and hurried out. It was a small thing, but it bothered him. Was she afraid of him? What kind of culture had developed under his nose while he was busy chasing success? Later that evening, while scrolling through employee satisfaction surveys on his tablet, David came across a particularly concerning comment. The executives live in their bubble up on the 30th floor. They have no idea what really goes on down here. He put down his tablet and walked to his bathroom mirror. At 52, he still maintained a fit physique, though his once black hair now showed distinguished streaks of silver. His tailored suit and designer glasses screamed successful CEO. But as he stared at his reflection, an idea began to form. "What if I could see things from ground level?" he muttered to himself. The next morning, David called Marcus Wong, his oldest friend and the company's head of security. After swearing him to secrecy, David shared his unconventional plan. "You want to do what?" Marcus asked, his eyes widening behind his thick glasses. "I want to work as a janitor in my own company for a month," David repeated. "No one except you and the board will know. I need to see firsthand what's happening in my company." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying his friend's face. "David, you're one of the most recognized faces in Seattle's tech scene. Someone will spot you immediately." David smiled for the first time in days. "That's where you come in. I need your help to become someone else entirely." Over the next week, David and Marcus worked with a professional makeup artist who specialized in movie productions. They created a new identity, Mike John, a middle-aged immigrant looking for honest work. The transformation was remarkable, with carefully applied prosthetics to alter his facial features, a slight shuffle in his walk, and a completely different wardrobe from a second-hand store. They created a believable backstory. Mike had recently moved from Vancouver, was working to support his family back home, and had limited English skills. The costume department helped age him slightly, added subtle touches like calluses on his hands, and even created a slight accent that David practiced for hours. The board of directors was initially skeptical when David presented his plan, but the mounting evidence of workplace issues convinced them. They agreed to keep his absence quiet, explaining to senior management that he was traveling for an extended client meeting in Asia. On a Monday morning in early March, David Chen walked into TechVision's building through the employee entrance for the first time in years. But he wasn't David Chen anymore. He was Mike Jan, the new night shift janitor. His own security guard didn't recognize him, simply handing him a visitor's badge after checking his falsified documents. As he waited for the service elevator with other maintenance staff, David's heart pounded. He was about to see his company through entirely new eyes. What he would discover over the next few weeks would change everything, not just for him, but for every person working in the building. Little did he know, this decision would become one of the most important moments in his company's history. Mike Zhang's first day as a janitor at TechVision started at 7 p.m., when most employees were heading home. Marcus introduced him to Joey, the head of the cleaning staff, a heavy-set man with kind eyes and 20 years of experience keeping the building spotless. "All right, Mike, stick with me tonight," Joey said, handing him a blue uniform with TechVision maintenance stitched on the pocket. "I'll show you the ropes." David, now fully in character as Mike, nodded shyly, and followed Joey to the janitor's closet. The small room was a far cry from his luxurious office 30 floors above. The harsh fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead as Joey explained the cleaning schedule. 28th floor first, Joey said, loading supplies onto a cart. That's where all the marketing people are. They're messy, but mostly nice. The tech folks on 29 are okay too. But, Joey paused, looking uncomfortable. But what? Mike asked softly, maintaining his practiced accent. 30th floor is different. That's where the bosses are. Just be invisible up there, okay? Don't make eye contact. Don't talk unless spoken to. Some of them. Joey shook his head. Well, you'll see. As they worked through the evening, David learned more about the cleaning staff than he had in 10 years as CEO. Maria had 3 kids and worked 2 jobs to pay for college. Tom was saving for his mother's surgery. Each person had a story, dreams, and struggles he had never bothered to learn about. Around 9 p.m., while cleaning the 29th floor, David encountered his first taste of the company culture from the other side. A group of young programmers were working late, empty energy drink cans scattered around their desks. "Hey, cleanup crew," one called out. "While you're here, there's a mess in the break room. Someone spilled coffee everywhere." David followed Joey to the break room. The spill looked deliberate. Coffee splattered in a way that couldn't be accidental, with cookie crumbs ground into the carpet. "They do this sometimes," Joey whispered as they cleaned. "When they're stressed about deadlines, they take it out on the place. No, they won't have to clean it up themselves." Later that night, on the 30th floor, David cleaned his own office. It felt surreal, dusting his own desk and emptying his own trash can. Through the window, he could see his reflection, not as the powerful CEO, but as Mike John, the invisible man with a vacuum cleaner. A voice from the doorway made him jump. Well, if it isn't our new cleaning guy." James Peterson, the head of sales, stood there with 2 other executives. David recognized the predatory smile on James's face, the same one he used during tough negotiations. "You missed a spot," James said, deliberately dropping his coffee cup on the freshly vacuumed carpet. His companions laughed as coffee spread across the expensive fibers. Sorry, David mumbled in his mic persona, quickly grabbing paper towels. "These people, I swear," James said loudly to his friends, "can't even understand basic English. No wonder they're stuck cleaning toilets." The others laughed again, walking away without a backward glance. David's hands shook as he cleaned up the mess. He had hired James 5 years ago, impressed by his aggressive sales tactics and results-driven attitude. Now he saw a different side of the man, and it made him sick. By the end of his first shift at 3 a.m., David's back ached, his hands were raw from cleaning solutions, and his mind was reeling. He had witnessed more disrespect, casual cruelty, and elitism in one night than he thought possible in his company. In the employee bathroom, washing his hands before leaving, David looked in the mirror. The makeup artist had done an amazing job. He saw no trace of David Chen in his reflection. But more than the physical transformation, he felt changed inside. In just one shift, he had begun to understand what it meant to be invisible in a place where he thought everyone mattered. As he walked to his car, parked 3 blocks away to maintain his cover, David realized this experiment would be harder than he imagined. But he also knew it was absolutely necessary. The truth about TechVision's culture was ugly, but he needed to see all of it before he could fix it. Tomorrow would be another day as Mike John, and he had a feeling things were about to get even more eye-opening. By his 3rd night as Mike John, David had settled into a routine. He arrived at 7, collected his cleaning supplies, and started from the bottom floors. But tonight was different. Joey had called in sick, leaving Mike to handle the 30th floor alone. "Just remember what I taught you," Joey had said over the phone, coughing. "And Mike, be careful up there." As David pushed his cart out of the service elevator onto the 30th floor, he heard voices from the main conference room. A late meeting was still in progress. He recognized the voices of his senior management team through the partially open door. "Did you see Chen's latest email about company culture?" Lisa Martinez, the HR director, was saying. "All this nonsense about respect and inclusivity. Classic CEO move," James Peterson replied. "He sits in his ivory tower, hasn't done real work in years, then lectures us about company culture. The room filled with laughter. David's hand tightened on his mop handle as he quietly began cleaning nearby. He had indeed sent that email last week, before starting his undercover mission. He thought Lisa, of all people, would support improving company culture. Speaking of culture, another voice chimed in. Did you see what I did to that new janitor the other night? Asian guy, barely speaks English. James sounded proud. Dropped my coffee right in front of him. You've seen him scramble to clean it up. More laughter followed. David's face burned under his makeup, but he kept mopping, moving closer to hear better. You're terrible, James, Lisa said, but she was laughing too. But seriously, these people need to learn their place. Yesterday, one of them actually tried to say good morning to me, like we're equals or something. David had heard enough. He deliberately pushed his cart past the conference room door, making enough noise to be noticed. The room fell silent. Through the gap, he saw James and Lisa exchange uncomfortable looks, but neither met his eyes. Later that night, while cleaning the break room, David overheard another conversation that made him pause. Two junior developers were working late, unaware of his presence around the corner. I can't take it anymore, Sarah, one was saying. Did you see how Peterson took credit for my project in today's meeting? 3 months of my work, and he presents it like he did everything. That's what they do, Tom, Sarah replied tiredly. Remember what happened to Jenny when she complained? Suddenly, all her performance reviews turned negative, and she was forced to quit. But it's not right. We should do something. And lose our jobs? I have student loans to pay. Just keep your head down and do your work. That's how it is at TechVision. David's heart sank. As CEO, he prided himself on running a meritocratic company where good work was rewarded. But here was evidence of systematic abuse of power, right under his nose. Around midnight, while emptying trash bins, David found something that made his blood run cold. In James Peterson's trash was a crumpled spreadsheet. Client billing hours that had been clearly inflated. Next to it was an email printout about adjusting project timelines to increase billable hours. David carefully smoothed out the papers and took photos with a small camera hidden in his uniform button. This wasn't just about bad behavior anymore. This was fraud. As his shift neared its end, David cleaned his own office last, as usual. Sitting in his expensive chair, now as Mike the janitor, he opened his desk drawer and found a framed photo of TechVision's early days, him and his first 5 employees, smiling, arms around each other like family. What happened to us? He whispered, touching the glass. The sound of approaching footsteps made him quickly return to his cleaning. 2 security guards walked by, not even glancing his way. Once, they would have greeted their CEO respectfully. Now, as Mike, he was invisible. Walking to his car at 3 a.m., David made a decision. 1 week as Mike Zhang had shown him more than 10 years of reports and meetings ever could. The problem wasn't just a few bad managers, it was a complete cultural breakdown. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, he would start gathering evidence. The next phase of his plan would change everything at TechVision, and some people weren't going to like it at all. The second week as Mike John brought David face to face with the darkest side of his company. Wednesday night started like any other, with David quietly pushing his cleaning cart through the empty halls of TechVision. But what he would witness that night would become the breaking point. It was around 8:30 p.m. when he heard loud voices coming from the main kitchen on the 30th floor. James Peterson and his inner circle were having some kind of celebration. Empty champagne bottles littered the counter, and their voices carried through the hallway. "Come on in, cleaning guy," James called out when he spotted Mike at the doorway. "We just closed a huge deal. Well, technically, Tom's team did all the work, but who cares? We get the commission." The group erupted in drunken laughter. David kept his head down, pretending not to understand much as he began wiping down the counters. His hidden camera was recording everything. "Watch this," James slurred to his friends. He walked over to where David was cleaning and deliberately knocked over a full glass of red wine. "Oops. Better clean that up, Mike. Chop chop." The group roared with laughter as the wine spread across the white tile floor. David's hands trembled as he reached for his cleaning supplies, but not from fear, from anger. He had hired James 8 years ago, thinking he was just ambitious. Now he saw the truth. The man was a bully who enjoyed humiliating others. "You know what I heard?" Lisa from HR chimed in, swaying slightly. Chen is extending his business trip in Asia, probably living it up in five-star hotels while we do all the real work here. Please, that guy hasn't done real work in years, another executive added. He's too busy writing emails about company culture and team spirit. What a joke. As David cleaned the wine spill, he heard them discussing ways to inflate their year-end bonuses by manipulating project numbers. They spoke openly, assuming the Chinese janitor couldn't understand their English. His hidden camera captured everything. Later that night, around midnight, David was cleaning the developer's area when he found Sarah, the junior programmer from last week, crying at her desk. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, forgetting to use his accent for a moment. Sarah quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm fine, Mr. Zhang. They rejected my promotion again. 3 years of perfect reviews, but suddenly they say I'm not ready." Meanwhile, James's nephew gets promoted after 6 months because he plays golf with the right people. David wanted to reveal himself right then to tell her things would change. Instead, he quietly offered her a tissue from his cleaning cart. "Thank you," she smiled sadly. "You're lucky in a way, Mr. Zhang. At least people don't pretend with you. They show who they really are." Those words hit David hard. As CEO, people showed him what they wanted him to see. As Mike, he saw their true faces. The final straw came around 2 a.m. While cleaning the conference room, David overheard James and Lisa discussing their latest scheme. "The client will never know we billed them for the extra hours," James was saying. "We just need to make sure the junior devs stay quiet. If anyone complains, we'll do what we did to Jenny, make their life hell until they quit." "What about Chen?" Lisa asked. "Please," the guy's clueless. "Throws money at diversity programs and team-building exercises while we run the real business. As long as the numbers look good, he doesn't ask questions." David had heard enough. Standing in that dark conference room, listening to his trusted executives plot and scheme, something broke inside him. He wasn't just angry. He was disappointed in himself. How had he let his company become this toxic? Back in the janitor's closet, David removed his fake nose and wig, staring at his reflection in the small mirror. 10 days as Mike Zhang had shown him more than 10 years as CEO. He had all the evidence he needed: recordings, documents, testimonies. Tomorrow, he decided, would be Mike Zhang's last day at TechVision, but it would also be the last day for many others. It was time to clean house, and not just with a mop and bucket. The company he had built with dreams of changing the world had lost its soul. Now it was time to get it back, no matter the cost. The next 3 days were the busiest of David's undercover operation. As Mike Zhang, he had become virtually invisible to the employees, which made him the perfect spy. Armed with his hidden camera and a small voice recorder, he methodically gathered evidence of everything wrong at TechVision. On Monday night, while cleaning the accounting department, he discovered printed emails showing how James and his team were double-billing clients. The documents revealed a complex scheme that had been running for months, possibly costing clients hundreds of thousands of dollars. "Just shred these after the audit," read a note attached to the papers. David carefully photographed everything before placing them back exactly as he had found them. During his Tuesday shift, he witnessed something that made his stomach turn. A young intern was working late, crying at her desk while talking on the phone. "Mom, I can't quit this job," she sobbed quietly. "We need the money for your treatment. I'll just do what Lisa says, even if it means working unpaid overtime, even if Mr. Peterson keeps making those comments." David wanted to step forward, to reveal himself and fix everything immediately. Instead, he forced himself to stay in character, quietly mopping nearby while his hidden recorder captured her conversation. He had learned that one person's story wasn't enough. He needed to reveal the entire toxic system. Wednesday brought another disturbing discovery. While cleaning the HR office, David found a drawer full of complaint forms that had never been processed. Complaints about harassment, discrimination, and unfair treatment, all marked resolved in the system but actually buried in Lisa's drawer. "Hey, cleanup guy," a voice made him jump. Lisa was standing at the door. "That drawer is private." Sorry, David mumbled in his mic accent, quickly closing it. "Just cleaning. Very dusty." Lisa watched him suspiciously as he hurried out with his cleaning cart. That night, he returned during her dinner break and photographed every single complaint form. By Thursday, David had compiled enough evidence to fill a small hard drive. Videos of executives mocking employees and bragging about their schemes. Documents proving financial fraud. Recordings of harassment and discrimination. Photos of buried complaint forms. Testimonies from frightened employees. Evidence of nepotism and unfair promotion practices. Late that night, alone in his janitor's disguise, David sat in his CEO office and began organizing everything. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, the company's founder, secretly working in his own office dressed as a cleaning man. He called Marcus, his head of security, and the only other person who knew his secret. "How soon can you arrange an all-hands meeting?" "Give me 48 hours," Marcus replied. "And David, are you sure about this? Some of these people are your friends." David thought about James's cruel laughter as he spilled drinks for Mike to clean. He remembered Lisa's buried complaint forms and the crying intern. He thought about Sarah, denied promotion despite her talent, and all the others suffering silently. "They stopped being my friends when they stopped caring about people," David said firmly. "Have the meeting ready for Monday morning. And Marcus, make sure everyone attends. No excuses." After hanging up, David looked at his reflection in the window. Mike Zhang's face looked back at him, tired, older, but somehow wiser. 10 days as a janitor had taught him more about leadership than 20 years as a CEO. He opened his laptop and began drafting 2 documents. The first was a list of people to be immediately terminated, starting with James Peterson and Lisa Martinez. The second was a complete reorganization plan for TechVision, focused on rebuilding the company culture from the ground up. At 3 a.m., as he was leaving the building for one of the last times as Mike Zhang, David passed the night security guard. "Good night, Mr. Zhang," the guard said kindly, one of the few who always treated him with respect. "Good night," David replied softly. "See you Monday. It's going to be an interesting morning." The guard just nodded, not knowing he had just spoken to the CEO, or that Monday would bring the biggest shakeup in TechVision's history. The cleaning was done. Now it was time for the real work to begin. Over the weekend, David Chen worked tirelessly from his home office, preparing for what would become known as the Monday morning revolution at TechVision. His dining room table was covered with documents, his laptop displaying hours of secretly recorded videos. Early Sunday morning, he called an emergency meeting with the board of directors at his house. 7 serious-faced men and women sat around his table, watching videos of James Peterson's cruel behavior, listening to recordings of Lisa's discrimination, and examining evidence of financial fraud. "This is worse than we imagined," said Eleanor Wright, the senior board member, removing her glasses with shaking hands. "How did we let this happen under our watch?" "The question now," David replied, "is how we fix it." He spread out his carefully prepared plans across the table. "I want to fire 30% of our management team. Immediately. No warnings, no second chances." The board members exchanged nervous looks. "That's over 50 people, David," said George Martinez, another board member. "The company could collapse." David stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the Seattle skyline where the TechVision building stood. "You haven't seen what I've seen this past 2 weeks. You haven't felt what it's like to be invisible, to be treated like you're nothing. Our company isn't just sick, it's dying from the inside." He turned back to face the board. "I've identified 25 talented junior employees who can step into management roles. People like Sarah Chen, no relation, who's been passed over for promotion 3 times despite excellent work. Tom Rodriguez, whose ideas were stolen by his superiors. Jenny Park, who was forced to quit but would come back if we asked." The next 2 hours were intense. David laid out his complete plan. Immediate termination of toxic managers. Promotion of deserving employees. New anonymous reporting system. Mandatory respect and inclusion training. Flat organizational structure. Complete audit of all client billing. Public apology to affected employees. New profit-sharing program for all staff levels. Marcus, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, spoke up. "The security team is ready. We changed all access codes and passwords. The moment you give the word, we can lock out everyone on the termination list." Eleanor leaned forward. "David, this is risky. Very risky." But she looked around at the other board members. I think it's necessary. What exactly do you plan to do tomorrow? David smiled for the first time that day. First, I'm going to show up as Mike Zhang one last time. I want to clean the building one final time. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Then, he outlined his dramatic reveal plan for the all-hands meeting. The board members listened, some gasping, others nodding approval. By the end of the meeting, all 7 had signed off on his plan. That night, David could barely sleep. He lay in bed, thinking about all the people who would be affected by tomorrow's actions. Some careers would end, others would begin. TechVision would never be the same. At 5 a.m. Monday morning, he got up and put on Mike Zhang's uniform one last time. The makeup artist arrived at 5:30 to do his transformation. As she worked, David reviewed his presentation for the 100th time. You're taking a big risk, the makeup artist said as she finished his disguise. Are you sure about this? David looked in the mirror at Mike Zhang's face. Sometimes, he said softly, you have to break things down completely to build them back up right. At 6 a.m., he arrived at the TechVision building. Marcus met him at the service entrance, hand on his security radio. Everything's ready, he whispered. It has locked down all systems. Security teams are in position. The all-hands meeting is set for 9 a.m. David nodded and picked up his mop. Then let's clean this building one last time, my friend. Not because we have to, but because every honest job deserves respect. As the sun rose over Seattle, David Chen, disguised as Mike Zhang, began his final shift as a janitor. In 3 hours, he would shock his entire company and change hundreds of lives forever. But for now, he simply cleaned, knowing that true leadership means being willing to do any job, no matter how humble. At 8:45 a.m. Monday morning, TechVision's main auditorium was filling up quickly. The mandatory all-hands meeting had caught everyone by surprise, especially with the CEO still supposedly in Asia. Employees whispered among themselves, wondering what was happening. James Peterson sat in the front row with his usual smug smile, checking his expensive watch every few minutes. Lisa Martinez from HR sat beside him, looking slightly nervous as she saw security guards positioned at every exit. Something's not right, she whispered to James. Why are there so many guards? In the back of the room, wearing his janitor's uniform, David watched his employees file in. He saw Sarah and Tom, the hard-working developers, sitting quietly in the middle rows. He noticed the young intern who had been crying at her desk last week. Everyone who needed to be there was present. At exactly 9 a.m., Marcus stepped onto the stage. Good morning, everyone. Please take your seats. The room fell silent. Marcus cleared his throat. Before we begin, all electronic devices must be turned off. Company policy for today's meeting. Confused murmurs filled the room as people powered down their phones. David knew that Marcus had already blocked all outgoing communications from the building. Nothing would leak until they were ready. Now, Marcus continued, please welcome our janitor, Mike Zhang, who has something to share with us. The confusion in the room turned to disbelief as David, still in his janitor's uniform, walked onto the stage. He heard James Peterson snicker in the front row. What's this? Take your janitor to work day. David stepped up to the microphone. Without saying a word, he began removing his disguise. First the wig, then the prosthetic nose, finally wiping away the makeup that had aged his face. The auditorium fell completely silent. James Peterson's smug smile disappeared. Lisa Martinez's face went pale. In the middle rows, Sarah and Tom sat forward in their seats, eyes wide with disbelief. Good morning, TechVision, David said in his normal voice. For those who haven't been paying attention, I'm David Chen, your CEO. Though for the past 2 weeks, you've known me as Mike Zhang, your night janitor. The silence in the room was deafening. David clicked a remote, and the large screen behind him came to life, showing a video compilation. James Peterson spilling drinks and laughing, Lisa Martinez discussing buried complaints, executives bragging about fraudulent billing. For 2 weeks, I cleaned your offices, emptied your trash, and watched how you treated people you thought were beneath you. I saw everything. I heard everything. And now, David's voice hardened. Everything changes. He nodded to Marcus, who signaled the security team. Guards approached James, Lisa, and several other executives. James Peterson, Lisa Martinez, and 48 other members of management are being terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Your computers have been locked, your access revoked, and investigations into financial fraud are already underway. James jumped to his feet. You can't do this. I built this department. Sit down, Mr. Peterson, David said quietly, or security will help you sit down. You have bullied your last employee at TechVision. As the guards led the shocked executives out, David continued. To those who suffered under their leadership, I apologize. I failed you by not seeing what was happening. That changes today. He began announcing promotions, Sarah to development director, Tom to project lead, the return of unfairly terminated employees like Jenny Park. With each announcement, the atmosphere in the room shifted from shock to hope. Starting today, TechVision has a new mission. We don't just build technology, we build people up. Every person in this company deserves respect, from the CEO to the cleaning staff. I learned more about leadership with a mop in my hand than I ever did in my corner office. Looking out at the faces of his employees, some crying, some smiling, all processing this dramatic moment, David felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The old TechVision died today, he concluded. The new TechVision starts now, and this time, we'll build it right. Together. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous roar. In the back of the room, Joey, the head janitor, was clapping the loudest of all. 1 year after the famous Monday morning revolution, TechVision had transformed into a completely different company. David Chen sat in his office, no longer at the top floor. He had converted the 30th floor into a shared workspace where employees of all levels could work together. The morning sun streamed through the windows as he reviewed the latest company reports. Employee satisfaction had jumped from 45% to 92%. Staff turnover had dropped to its lowest level in company history. Most surprisingly, company value had doubled to $100 million, proving that treating people right was good for business. Sarah Chen, now the development director, knocked on his open door. Got a minute, David? He smiled, remembering how a year ago she had been crying at her desk, denied promotion despite her talents. Now she led the company's most successful team. Remember that junior developer program you suggested? Sarah said, sitting down. We just graduated our first class. 20 new developers, all from backgrounds that wouldn't traditionally get these opportunities. 3 of them were former cleaning staff who showed interest in coding. David nodded, thinking of Joey, his former supervisor during his undercover days. Joey was now the head of facilities management, with a seat on the company's leadership council. His experience and wisdom had proved invaluable in reshaping the company culture. The story of TechVision's transformation had gone viral. Business magazines called it the Janitor CEO revolution. Other companies started implementing similar programs, sending executives to work undercover in junior positions. David had even written a book, Lessons from the Night Shift, which became a bestseller. James Peterson and the other fired executives had tried to sue the company, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. Some faced criminal charges for fraud. Lisa Martinez had publicly apologized and now worked consulting companies on how to prevent toxic workplace culture. Walking through the office, David saw the changes everywhere. The old hierarchical structure was gone. Developers sat next to managers, interns could speak directly to directors, and yes, the cleaning staff were treated with respect and included in company meetings. Tom Rodriguez, now a project lead, was teaching a coding class to a group that included 2 janitors interested in technology careers. The intern who had once cried about unpaid overtime was now a rising star in the marketing department. Her mother's medical bills covered by the company's new comprehensive healthcare plan. Mr. Chen, a voice called out. It was Mike, one of the security guards. The new community outreach program you approved? We just got 20 underprivileged kids signed up for the summer tech camp. David shook Mike's hand warmly. The security team, once just silent observers, were now active participants in company initiatives. Every employee, regardless of role, could propose and lead projects. In the break room, David helped himself to coffee, remembering how executives used to deliberately spill drinks for janitors to clean. Now, everyone cleaned up after themselves. A sign on the wall read, "At TechVision, we all carry the mop." That afternoon, during the monthly all-hands meeting, David looked out at his employees, all equals, all valued. Jenny Park, who had been forced out and returned, was presenting her team's successful project. The applause for her was genuine and warm. A year ago, David said when Jenny finished, I learned that true leadership isn't about corner offices or fancy titles. It's about respect, dignity, and recognizing the humanity in every person who walks through our doors. He paused, looking at the familiar faces. They say power corrupts, but I say invisibility reveals. When I became Mike Chang, I saw the truth about our company, but more importantly, I saw the truth about leadership. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to clean up a mess. The company's new motto was displayed proudly on the wall. Every role matters, every voice counts. Below it hung a framed janitor's uniform, Mike Chang's uniform, as a reminder of the lessons learned. As David walked to his car that evening, he passed the cleaning crew arriving for their shift. They weren't invisible anymore. They were part of the TechVision family, with full benefits, stock options, and most importantly, respect. Good evening, Mr. Chen, they called out. Good evening, my friends, he replied, remembering his own nights pushing a mop through these halls. Thank you for all you do. And he meant it, with all his heart.